Yep.
Thank you, Roger. Okay, my name's Carell Buxton, for those of you who don't know me. And it's quite a different approach to a Sunday WIN meeting, because this afternoon we're talking about preparing for the WIN conference, which is on the 9th and 10th of September, so not too long to go now. And it's an international event, and really this meeting this afternoon is a foretaste of that event. So what I'm going to do is just set out for you the format of today. There's going to be a short preview of practical arrangements, and that's going to be from you, Roger, I understand. And then there will be 3 10-minute mini introductions to 3 topics. So they are as follows, and this will be the order that I will take them in. US-China relations, that's David Hempson. The Ukraine war, which will be Olivier. And thirdly, building the international, which will be Roger. And then free discussion from the floor. After each of the mini introductions, I'll let people have an opportunity just to speak for a few minutes. Is that okay with everyone? Everyone happy with that format?
Sorry to everybody about that. As I say, I had very little notice, and I've had no practice at doing that before. But anyway, it is a very nice surroundings. And of course, all our subscribers, whatever their particular political viewpoints, are welcome to participate. We've got on our mailing list, we've got almost 400 comrades, and of course the invitation is open to all of them. The agenda, as Carell has said, includes sessions on US-China relations, on the Ukraine war, with some alternative points of view, on building the international, and maybe some organizational plans too. So it's not too late to book your place. And the total cost of attendance, and that includes 2 days accommodation at that beautiful venue, all meals, full conference facilities. The whole thing is offered now at a reduced rate of £100, or the equivalent, which I reckon is $125 or 120 euros. We will also have a video link, and we're sorting out the video connections. I hope there'll be no problem with that, but the video link is available free of charge. But we would ask comrades who are using that facility to please give a token donation. But I would emphasize participation in person at a conference like this is at least 100 times more valuable than just logging on to listen and maybe participate in the discussions, because it's not only what happens on the conference floor, it's the interactions, it's the informal conversations, the bonding and all the rest of it. So I think it's a very important part of building an organization. So anyway, if you want to book or to register for a video link, you should contact Pam, who's here now, and her email address is on the notice that you got for this meeting.
Yeah.
And we also sent you details of payment to our account. We have a Workers International Network bank account. So all the connections are there, the codes, including IBAN code and everything, is all there on the meeting notice. So that really is all I need to say about that. I would really urge comrades to log on. As Pam said, we booked 10 rooms, which means accommodation for at least 20, but we can book more rooms if necessary. I hope that we will need to, because that's quite small for a meeting of WIN. where, as I say, we do have 400 people on our mailing list, and where our meetings are usually over 20, 25, and they have been, I think at their peak, we've had 50 to 60 actually participating in these meetings. So please do consider seriously registering for our conference if there's any chance that you could make it. So I'll leave it at that, comrade.
Thanks, Roger. Has anyone got any particular questions about arrangements that they'd like to ask now? Just put your hand up if you have. No, okay, that's good. That was all very well explained, and the images look lovely. I have visited it before, and it is a beautiful setting, so I'd urge everybody, if you can get there physically, please do so. Okay, so now we're going to move to the sort of 10-minute mini sessions. Just to say something about these, they're a foretaste of the event. They're not really an explanation or a setting out of a win position. They are just a foretaste of what discussion will happen once we are at the conference. So the first session is from you, that mini session is from you, David, on US-China relations. If you could give a little foretaste of what that session will be like. I'll give you 10 minutes. You might not want that long, but if you go over, what I'll do is at 9 minutes, I'll give you a little warning, all right?
Yes, wave the stick.
I'll just wave at you like that.
Well, look, first of all, Ed and I have been preparing a document for circulation, and I have to start with an apology. It should be in your hands. You should already have 100 points to make in agreement or disagreement with this. And I really hope that Ed is going to be present to be able to jointly make the points, or make the points with some reservations. But anyway, to put a position, it's not that controversial, although it does raise some interesting, very significant points. This is the topic of all discussion at the moment in the bourgeois press, on the left, everywhere. There's a concern not only about the Ukrainian war, but is China and the United States heading for a similar conflict? And are we looking into the void of a world conflagration? At a number of points. And I've been rewriting it or writing it again with the recent US diplomatic initiatives in mind. I'll come back to that a little later. But the basic points are, I think, common understanding. China has risen from a semi-colonial state with a Communist Party bureaucracy to the second great power, economic power in the world. That's an extraordinary development from a country which was regarded as a semi-colony, forced to import opium and to be subjected to the crudest of imperialist trade policies, in the 1800s and beyond. And so this is a huge development which we all celebrate, and it's basically been achieved through the exercise of a planned economy, which is very far from being a democratic planned economy, but it has forced the development of China's economic base into something substantial. And this is where there's another component. The key element here, which I identified, is not only their planned economy, But after 1999, China joined the World Trade Organization, and very dissimilarly to Russia, has ended up now as the major trading nation in the world, with a fantastic resource of foreign exchange in US dollars, not in gold or other currencies, US dollars. In other words, there's a symbiotic relationship between China and the United States, which Trump has stretched to breaking point, but which has not broken. Biden has not changed Trump's policy, but now as the Ukrainian war develops and China is becoming locked into a relationship with Russia, or vice versa, in other words, Russia may be becoming more dependent on China. The current United States initiative is designed to pull that apart, to be able to undermine in some extent the initiative which is taken through the BRICS agreement, which is Russia, Brazil, South Africa, and India, and also to undertake another chess move, if you could use the term, of opening up United States opening up a new level of relationship with India as a counterpoint to China. So we're seeing a reversal of existing trading and political relationships, and the development, if I could say, of possibly there's a fragmentation of existing trading blocks and the reassertion of new blocks under the term multipolar world, where all kinds of states are to be, relationships are developing with different states on a completely different basis. If BRICS succeeds, it would become the major trading bloc of the world, as opposed to the United States and the EU. On the other hand, it's unlikely to succeed, but I don't want to go into this too far because it takes us a little too far away from the key point. With India and China in some tension, it's unlikely to become the trading bloc in the future. So the question is, will there or will there not be a war? The argument presented is that all wars can result from misunderstandings. Last night I was watching a deeply moving and a kind of traumatic representation of World War I, where one of the speakers or person interviewed was saying that they were having a football game, England versus Germany, and no one could believe that World War I had actually started, and they completed the game before they separated. It was such a shock, it could not be believed. Well, we're entering a period where it wouldn't be such a shock because it has been anticipated in some way, but still misunderstandings, accidents, all of this is part of the potential triggering of a conflict which is vastly self-destructive and mutually destructive. And all of this is being played out at a time when the world is warming up in the most horrific manner, vastly accelerated beyond scientific prediction, and the world is entering into a period of ultra tension, both at the climatic stage where people have to be taken off islands when they went there for holidays, and everywhere there's tension and degradation of the environment in an unprecedented level. So China and the opportunity through this initiative would be that, unbelievably or possibly believably, the Nixon initiative, which took place in 1972, could be reenacted. On the other hand, we're arguing that's it's very unlikely because many of the elements of the past, have changed quite dramatically. So it's an open-ended discussion. There's no prescription, but except to say that war is not necessarily inevitable, but it's very likely prospect if there are not major changes, in particular the working class rising to its feet in China and in America. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And you didn't go to, you didn't need my little sign that I'd made. That was just over 7 minutes. Thank you very much. I mean, this will be a session that will give us such food for thought, because the rise of the Chinese working class, the biggest working class, I think, in the world, and how we, how we find out about what's going on there will be of great interest, I'm sure, to comrades. And is there anybody who wants to ask a question or make a very brief contribution? Put your hand up if you do. Okay. All right, so we'll go to the next mini introduction, which is from Olivier, and does link in with the previous speaker, and that is the Ukraine war. So over to you, Olivier.
Hi, comrades. Do you hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Okay. To begin with, I must say I should never have accepted to make this presentation. And I admit I spent a long time in front of my blank sheet before writing. The roadmap is as follows. Introduce the discussion on the war in Ukraine and its consequences by presenting the point of view present, if possible, in a balanced way. It is in order to feed the collective discussion and not to put an end to the exchange by the affirmation of clear-cut and definitive points of view. I remind those of the participants who don't know me that my point of view is shared by my comrades of the editorial board of Argument pour la lutte sociale, which publishes in France the blog appelutsoc.org. And our point of view is not above ground. Before we engage after February 24 in the European network of solidarity with Ukraine, we first starting, as far as we are concerned, back from 2015, when we began to campaign with young Ukrainian comrades who were anarchist, Antifa, feminist, socialist, for the release of Ukrainian left-wing activists who were victims from frame-ups by the Russian authorities. We saw the success of this international campaign against repression when in September 2019, Ukrainian citizens Alexander Kolchenko and Oleg Sentsov were released and escaped decades of imprisonment in Putin's Gulag. Through this activity, we have not only discovered this new young generation, but also retold the historical thread of events since the Ukrainian Revolution of 1917-1921, the existence of a Ukrainian revolutionary left with various facets, the Ukapist, the Borodbist, the pro-independence Ukrainian Bolsheviks, the question of the debates around the creation of the USSR at a time when Stalin was arguing for a kind of federation of Russia as it exists today, the positions of Lenin and Trotsky for Ukrainian independence, and the application of democratic methods to solve all the national questions and issues. Before that, we also rediscovered the place of the first Ukrainian Marxist and socialist nuclei in the late 19th century, in the national cultural rebirth, and the rise of the struggle for independence against the empires of the time, the Tsarist Russia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire of the Habsburgs. In 1917, when the revolution broke out in Petrograd, Ukrainian soldiers and workers occupied an important place in the capital of the revolution until October. But we must also study what the Ukrainian Revolution was like from 1917 to 1921. The national question in USSR was at the heart of Lenin's last fight in coalition with Leon Trotsky against the new rising bureaucracy. National questions were at first place in the suppression of all democratic freedoms during the rise of the bureaucracy until the totalitarian explosion of Stalinism with the bloody purges in the 30s. This notably led to the extermination of the Communist Party of Western Ukraine, a mass party, thus leaving room for the development of integral nationalist fascist current, today identified by a single surname, Bandera. Bandera was a product of Stalinism. Stalinism gave birth to this reactionary political current by crushing the left and the labor movement in Ukraine, as well as in the entire Soviet Union, and by inflicting the martyrdom of more than 4 million deaths from the famine of 1932-1933. This famine remained in Ukrainian collective memory as the Holodomor. It should be also recalled from the how the Ukrainian dissidents in the 60s linked the national Ukrainian question to the demands for democratic freedoms that all the dissidents of the time, the generation of the Samizdats, asserted with force and courage at the risk of stays in Brezhnev's psychiatric hospitals. These Ukrainian dissidents raise the question of the memory of the Nazi persecution against the Jews, in particular through the battle for the establishment of a memorial to the victims of the Holocaust in Babi Yar, where the Stalinist bureaucracy only wanted to know the heroes and martyrs of the Great Patriotic War, and remained in the whole traditions of Russian anti-Semitism, then remain struggle against cosmopolitanism and Zionism. Why I am spending so much time on these historical reminders in a very short 10 minutes allotted to me? For a fundamental reason, the difficulty of many activists on the left to have an opinion. At best, we have ignorance. At worst, we have the acceptance of storytelling written by Russian state services, with the spread of myths about the Ukrainian Nazi, the Orange Revolution of 2004 and 2014, sponsored by the Jews, Soros, and the CIA, or the oppression of ethnic Russians in Donbass, and other myths. And between the two, the recycling of frameworks of analysis who had been outdated since 1989, and the non-realization of the prognosis for the political revolution, which we were expecting for, would restore the radiant march forward socialism. We also have the mixed between elements of analysis from Putin's propaganda and elements of reminder of correct factual and historical position. This mixture refers to a position above the fray, an abstract or abstentionist position. This element of language, this interpretation of events by Putin's propaganda are knowingly disseminated today by Stalinist networks or by red-brown networks, accepted by naive, misinformed leftist militants. This weakness of sincere left activists results from several factors. First, the lack of a mass revolutionary international bringing together all sectors of the international working class with a connection to all social and democratic struggles all over the planet. Second, the weakness of reflection amongst Marxist left about what was the USSR, Stalinism, and the significance of the events of 1989 and 1991, with the final collapse of the USSR and the fall of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Third, the weakness of the reflection on the left on what imperialism is today, at a time when the major confrontation puts face to face the now in decline former hyperpower of the USA and the new Chinese imperialist center built on the economic miracle that follows the turning point launched in 1978 by Deng Xiaoping with his famous slogan, "Get rich." A miracle that was sealed and guaranteed by the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. We also need to ask ourselves about the modalities of the rise of tension in the clashes for the redistribution of the world between the different imperialist centers. It is not only a face-to-face between China and USA. We must also take into account the countries of European Union, Japan, Australia, South Korea, Canada, and all the countries united under the acronym BRICS. What about India, with its 1 billion people now outpacing China demographically? What about the regional powers aspiring to their place in the world chessboard? Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, etc. We are no longer in 1945, nor in 1968, nor in 1989, and no longer in 2001 and 2003 in the firmament of the US power. But we are in a situation that in many ways bears some resemblance to 1914, when tensions rose and accumulating until the storm of First World War broke.
You've got a minute now, Olivier. Sorry.
Okay.
You're going to manage it in a minute? Or do you need a little bit longer?
Between 1 and 2 minutes.
Fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's back to the heart of the subject of this talk, the war in Ukraine. The good old question comes up again and again. Which side are you on? With the abused against the abuser? Can we be in a back-to-back dismissal? Does the formerly colonized country has the right to defend itself by any means necessary, in the word of Malcolm X, against the revengeful of old imperial power? Or should we promote an attitude of revolutionary defeatism based on the fraternization of Russian and Ukrainian workers pitted against each other by two camps sharing the same wrongs? What should be the position of the labor movement in Ukraine? Today, in Ukraine, all trade unions are engaged in the war effort, especially the independent and combative KVPU trade unions, which materially and psychologically support their members engaged on the front line, while leading the trade union fight against the neoliberal course of the Zelensky government, which favors the bosses and breaks the labor code. This Ukrainian trade union and the socialist left, in particular the Socialny Ruch, denounce the weakening of the war effort each time the neoliberal majority in the parliament, the Rada, adopt antisocial and draconian measures. Today, there is a wave of strike in the health sectors against the reduction of wages, the delay in the payment of wages, the deterioration of the working condition. Health workers, mostly working women, are ready to make sacrifice for the war of national liberation, but not for the bosses and the oligarch to profit from this war effort. Today, there is a struggle of the student union, which is named Direct Action, Prima Dia, which fights for the improvement of study conditions for students despite the war situation, for the right to free education for all, against the neoliberal agenda in higher education. There is a struggle of feminist and LGBT associations against the reactionary measure promoted by religious currents as well as by fascist and male supremacist currents. LGBT people are demanding equal rights while fighting on the front line against Putin imperialism, the same Putin which has just passed a series of anti-LGBT law in Russia in recent days. Women are on the front line and claim equal rights, their full place in society and not a subordinate place. Solidarity with the Ukrainian left and all progressive movements in the country can only materialize from an unescapable minimum base. Russian troops must immediately leave all Ukrainian territory. This brings us back to the basic question. What do we want to do? Reaching out all workers in Ukraine and Russia for discussion and joint action? Or do we want to stand by this side of the road as spectators? To conclude this presentation, I draw the attention of comrades to what is at stake in the discussion on the war in Ukraine. It is not only about the the relationship we can establish with left organization and social movement in Ukraine. It is also about the relationship we can establish with left movements, trade unions, feminist, democratic movement in Russia, in Belarus, in Kazakhstan, in Iran, in China, in Burma, in India, South Africa, Nicaragua, and so on. This discussion has also consequences with what is happening in Mali, in Burkina, in Central African Republic, in Sudan, all places where the Wagner militias are present. This also concerns Syria, which was the first country where Putin took over the declining US imperialism to ensure the maintenance of the well-established order. An erroneous attitude under the pretext of anti-imperialism, reduced to the only struggle against the USA, will put us out of the game. We can't afford it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Olivier. And yeah, I gave you a lot more time because I wanted you to have that opportunity. And of course, one of the things that we have said, I said at the beginning, is this isn't a position statement from WIN, but it is about, and I think that this discussion that is going to be happening will show that WIN is a network, and we are very good at listening to each other. We have a full debate. No one's ideas are shut down, and I think we showed that this afternoon. So it was very good, and I'm sorry that you said that you were struggling to approach it. You did very well, Olivier. So thank you very much for that contribution. Does anybody want to say anything about Olivier's, how he set out his ideas? It's a little foretaste of I think a big debate happened on the 9th of September. Has anybody? Yeah, Roger's got his hand up. And anybody else? Okay, Roger, I will hand over to you for a moment.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you very much to Olivier for explaining his point of view, and he put it very, very clearly. And it's very obvious to everybody that this is a very difficult subject. It's a controversial subject. It puts socialists on a very difficult dilemma in relation to their attitude towards the position of the governments of NATO countries and of the West also. Olivier, I actually don't think I disagreed with anything that Olivier said, but there is another side to this, and we're proud of the fact that we do have a completely open and democratic practice in WIN, where we exchange ideas. We will be discussing, comrades will have seen probably from the last issue of On the Brink, that there are different points of view within WIN on the attitude to take towards the Ukraine war. And I have to say, comrades will know, because in On the Brink, the last issue, there were articles by myself and by Olivier putting different points of view, alternative points of view in relation to the Ukraine war. And we will be discussing that in the conference. And we invited Olivier to put his point of view here, but I'm not intending to try to reply to his point, because that is going to be the subject matter of one important session at the conference that is coming. And the point of this meeting is really just to give comrades a preview of the kind of issues that we'll be discussing, and not to try to resolve the issues in miniature, if you like, in the short time available in a meeting like this. Of course, the discussion will continue. But I think we're very proud of the fact. I don't know if there's any other left tendency which has such an open and democratic attitude, and which doesn't insist on a point of view. At this conference, we can't really take a vote to take a majority position, because it's not a delegate conference. It's open to anybody who wishes to participate. And so we can take this as a part of the enrichment of the discussion and of the understanding of all the comrades through the exchange of ideas and of alternative points of view. So I just would like to make that clear to comrades that what Olivier said is a point of view, and we welcome very much his expression of that point of view. But there are also others, and I'm not going to attempt to try to summarize it, but just to say I do think this is going to be a really extremely useful and educational discussion, and that alone makes it very much worthwhile for comrades to participate in the conference, preferably in person, but at least, if not, then at least online. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you, Roger. So David Hempson and then Finn. Oh, and then Patrick. Sorry, I didn't see your hand, Patrick. So David, Finn, and then Patrick. Go on, David.
Okay, look, again, I would reinforce what Roger said. Marvelous contribution. I want to raise some specific points and some general. First of all, I was quite surprised, and just as a kind of point of information, if you could put it that way, to know Stalin's position on Ukraine. Obviously, Stalin had this very formalistic definition of a nation, which was related to a common heritage among those people, a common historic destiny, use some phrase like that, a common language, and, to some extent then also the state, a common state. I wonder just how that actually worked out. Of course, what Stalin may have said and what he actually did were probably quite something different. But I noticed you didn't mention, or maybe I missed hearing, the heritage or the memory of the famine of the 1930s. And I wondered if that, how that fits into the understanding of Ukraine as, the nationhood or the common suffering as a nation and so forth. Two general points. First of all, I noticed that the EU is very insistent on the Ukrainian state making an investigation into corruption and meeting its standards, or whatever those standards may be. It's obvious that the Ukrainian state has emerged from a semi-oligarchic state in some ways to another state. Let's look at that. And, to what extent is the state independent of the old oligarchs? I mean, or is it becoming linked up to new oligarchs? Obviously, it started as a state which was more or less in the image of the Russian, the core Russian state. So it wouldn't have been anything like a state, shall we say, in the EU. But I wonder, what are the issues there which are, being raised at that time? Raised right now as almost as a formal entry point for Ukraine to meet before it could be considered as a member of the EU. That's one. It's obviously there are some issues there, and then particularly in relation to what is termed corruption, and that is the very extravagant statements made in the past and maybe even now about corruption in Ukraine. I don't know to what extent those are valid or not, or how that's being raised. So the nature of the Ukrainian state is an important issue, not about its character and it's all its sides to it. And then finally, I would make the point that the whole issues that were raised in 2014 and prior to that and beyond, related to markets and to what character the Ukrainian people were giving to themselves. But just looking at it in relation to the market, the criteria of markets, I wondered if you could, I don't want to stretch you too far, but just to consider the way in which the question was raised about joining the EU then, I think it was, or prior even to 2014, and to how that issue was played, the weight of the EU as a market compared to the weight of of Russia as a competitive market, and so forth. Obviously, it was these are not insignificant factors in terms of the what can I say, the direction of people's interest, even of the working class, trying to see a way out of both towards independent development or incorporation into a larger economic entity. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Finn?
Comrades, I don't want to make a substantial contribution to the discussion at this point because, as Roger explained, that belongs to the conference, but I've lots of things to say about Ukraine. We're very much involved in Ireland in discussions about Ukraine. We've had contact with Ukraine trade unionists and discussions, and at the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, which was held in Kilkenny, which is about 100 miles from here, 2 weeks ago, I moved a resolution on the issue of Ukraine, which was accepted unanimously by the Irish Congress. So we're heavily involved in discussions, and I think I'm looking forward to listening to the debate. I think there was a very significant point Roger made at the end when he said there won't be a vote on the issues at conference, because the kind of organisations I represent reflect different viewpoints, and the situation in Ukraine is changing. The general principles we all agree with. We don't need to discuss, I presume, the general principles which we all agree about right of self-determination. We're opposed to imperialistic adventures and invasions of sovereign countries. Now, we're in agreement about all of that and about the right-wing regime that in Ukraine, Zelensky speaks for in terms of anti-trade union legislation and privatization and so on. So there's agreement about general principles, and that's why it's important that we don't vote and take one position or the other, and instead welcome the discussion. When I've read the documents in the On the Brink, and there's aspects in both documents, more in terms of approach than in terms of fundamental difference, but there are things I would disagree with in both documents. So I'm looking forward to listening to the discussion. It'll be a useful discussion. It will be a better discussion if at the end of it we don't have to decide on one position or the other, so that every comrade can contribute freely and in a relaxed manner to a broad discussion. So when we leave the conference, having heard the discussion in Ukraine, we would all of necessity be wiser and fuller in our understanding of the issues, so we can reconsider the issues as they emerge at the conference and come back to an ongoing and very flexible situation in Ukraine. So I want to thank both comrades for the contributions they've made, both Olivia and Roger, to the discussion today. But lots of us are involved to one degree or another in the Ukrainian discussion, so it's very important internationally, particularly as Olivia emphasised, the links with the Ukrainian trade unionists and what the Ukrainian trade union movement are asking us to do in support of them. So that's all. But anyway, I have lots of points, but I'll obviously wait until the conference to discuss these issues.
Thank you very much, Finn. And Patrick?
I have some points. I'm not sure if I agree with Olivier, but it's hard to say after such a short contribution. My wife is Ukrainian, and I've been on and off living in Ukraine for maybe 17 years, visiting there. Now my wife's parents are in Sweden as refugees, and we have a young boy living in our flat, also a refugee from Ukraine. So we have in Sweden also, we're involved in the discussions about Ukraine. And there are some things. First of all, when Putin attacked Ukraine, he tried to say that the Ukrainian nation was just an invention by Lenin. There is no real Ukrainian nation. There is no real Ukrainian language. It's just a version of Russian. And of course, he was wrong. And that's one side of what I think is reality. Putin was wrong about that. But the other side of reality is that the Ukrainian nation is not as it's complicated, because in the West you have Ukrainian speaking Ukrainian. In the East you have people speaking Russian, identifying themselves as Russians, but still think that they should live in Ukraine. In many parts, my wife comes from Odessa. It's a Russian-speaking town. She comes from a small village outside of Odessa, where they speak some kind of mix between Ukrainian and Russian, which is called sushki. And the joke is that when they get on the train in the morning, they speak sushki when they are in the village, and then when the train stops in Odessa, everyone speaks Russian. And in Crimea, which I visited a couple of years ago, people felt like Russians, and many of them wanted to belong to Russia. So it's not that easy. Of course, Putin is wrong, but Ukraine is a mix of different languages. They have, I think it's 4 different churches. One of the churches belong to the Moscow Pope, and there is another Ukrainian church, and so on. So it's very complicated. It's not easy. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that when it comes to what should socialists say, and I think if I was living now in the Ukraine, I would say my point when it comes to the war, it would be, we need negotiations now, negotiations to stop the war. Because right now the war is going nowhere. More and more it looks like the First World War, where a couple of kilometers cost thousands and thousands of lives on both sides. It's going nowhere, and we need negotiations, because just lives are going to waste. And I think when my wife was there just a month ago, she went to the market, and the old woman selling something to her, she said, "You will have 3 hryvnias off the price. It's a peace price." She didn't say it's a victory price. It's a peace price. I think that war wariness is growing in the Ukraine, and of course, as it is in Russia, and everyone would benefit from a peace. So that's what I think. I'm not sure, and I'm positive about the things that has been said about we need to have a discussion, an open discussion. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Well, I think we've just had a little foretaste, haven't we, of the lively, open debate that we're going to have at the conference in September. And I think that's our strength in WIN, that's our tradition. I think it is absolutely right that we're not going to be voting. And we'll all come away from that a lot wiser and a lot more knowledgeable about what's going on around the world. So thank you very much, everybody who has spoken this afternoon. We're going to go into the last mini taster. Now, Roger, you are renowned for keeping to time when you speak. So I am going to time you, but I was very easy on Olivier. So I will be fairly easy on you, comrade, as well. You'll be pleased to know. So your session is building the international. So over to you, Roger.
Right, thank you very much, Karel. I actually think I may not use my full 10 minutes, because in discussing the building the international, it's a huge topic. And if I begin to get involved in really the content of it, I couldn't do it in 10 minutes or probably a couple of hours. So I'm actually writing a document for comrades to consider, and I think I'll be able to circulate it within the next few days. But the problem I've had with writing it over a long period is it's not that I've had problems what to say, but problems of what to cut out. Actually, what I've got now is over 100 pages, so I'm going to. My problem is cutting it down to a manageable, digestible format, probably of about half that length. So all I want to say is that this is one of the most important discussions that we're having. In fact, it's the purpose of WIN is we're not a discussion group. We're not only a discussion group, although I think we're a very good discussion group. But but our discussion has a purpose. There is a point to it. It's not a question of academic hobby, if you like. It's to help to sharpen our ideas, as I'm sure our debate on the Ukraine will sharpen and clarify our ideas. For all of us, from whatever angles we're approaching the issue. But the reason why we're discussing why it's such a urgent and crucial question is there's unprecedented turmoil around the world, uprisings worldwide. We've detailed them, of course, in every meeting we've had of WIN. As I think I said before, we actually have interacted directly with comrades in 34 countries, and we've had on-the-spot eyewitness reports of workers' struggles from most of those countries. We're very proud we've been able to provide a forum and arena for reports and discussion of the of the actual struggles of the working class as they're taking place from all over the world, from Latin America, from North America, from the USA, from Africa, from Asia, from Belarus, from other countries in Europe and so on. But all these struggles that are taking place, they're crying out for worldwide coordination. And therefore it needs an international body. It needs an arena. It needs a forum for the exchange of experiences. And more than that, it's a workshop to hammer out a common program and a common strategy. And one thing we'll be doing in the discussion is to review the experiences of the past. There have been 3 great international organizations of the working class so far, each of them memorials to past worldwide upsurges and movements. And we'll be discussing each of those, the role of each of them, and the causes also of their respective downfalls. The first international, when it came into existence in 1864, it was actually hailed by no lesser source than the Times, which was the main organ of the world capitalist class at the time, and they called it an event as significant as the birth of Christianity, and they were absolutely right. But that shows what a absolute impact and influence the coming together of the working class, even at that early stage, represented. The Second International, when it was created, began by organizing a European-wide general strike, a simultaneous general strike, and Engels celebrated the birth of that international and of that and the staging of that strike, as he said that our work has been fulfilled. If only Marx were by my side. It's the complete. It's the results. It's the embodiment of all our work over our period. Then, of course, that organization too fell victim to. I don't want to go into the history because that will be the part of the topic we were discussing. We need to be discussing the Third International. The fact that when the Third International was created, it was at a time when the working class had taken power in one major country, and actually at the time in a couple of smaller countries too. And it was an inspiration to revolutionary movements around the world until it became corrupted and mangled and transformed into an instrument of a rising bureaucracy. We also need to discuss the history, the short history of what we can only call the stillborn Fourth International. But not only the fact that it actually did not materialize in mass organizations, but what contribution it made to theory, how it guides us to the future, and how and why it did in fact fail. But above all, we'll be discussing how a new international is not only urgently needed, but how it's actually gestating now. It's coming into existence in one form or another. And we need to discuss what character will it have, what form will it take, how does our work fit into that, and also what has been achieved, and how we can best intervene or at least cooperate or participate in that process. As I say, we are doing everything that we could to interact with comrades throughout the world and to make new contacts. If you think what Marx and Engels did when they were preparing the development of the First International, what they did really is, first of all, they used the postage system in order to actually write letters to keep in contact from their exile in Britain with comrades in France and in Germany and in some other countries. They actually, sometimes they could not find the money in order to buy the postage stamps. That was the level of technology at the time, if you like, the level of communications at the time. But they did that in order to just working day and night in order to try to get people together and to use the arena of the First International in order to try to develop a theory and a strategy and a guide to action. And that's what we're trying to do as well. And we, of course, have the advantage that not only that postage is a little cheaper, but also that we have the incredible advantage that this Zoom has given us. That it's given us access to information through the internet and access to communication through Zoom. Give us an enormous advantage, and we have to use that to the full. And I believe that Marx and Engels would have acted in more or less the same way that we're doing now in order to try to build the basis for future world organizations of the working class. So what we'll be discussing is that, and also how we can develop and how we can move forward. Are we just a discussion group? Should we be putting forward a unified line, for instance, on the Ukraine war? Should we be cooperating with other similar groups and tendencies? We are currently in discussion with one very serious international group that seems to have been evolving along similar lines to ourselves in terms of their political outlook. Should we open up relations with other groups too? What would Marx, Lenin, or Trotsky have done in our situation? How have conditions changed since their day? Those are the kind of issues that we'll be tackling in our discussion at the conference. And this is our opportunity to open a debate on how we move forward, not, as I say, simply to exchange ideas, but to actually sharpen the vanguard of the movement, which is already flexing its muscles in every continent on Earth. That's it, comrade.
Thank you, Roger. I'm going to open it up now for anybody who would like to make a short contribution or to ask Roger any questions. Any hands? Can't see any. Well, you were under 10 minutes, Roger, which is brilliant. Thank you so much. So if there's no other hands up, I just want to make a few closing remarks. And then actually, Roger, I'd like to hand back to you for some practicalities about the next WIN Sunday meeting, what the date of that is, if we've got those dates. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a very, very important meeting, the conference. It's going to be, you know, great to see people if they're on Zoom, but even better if we can actually meet in person. I mean, all of us are involved in at some level or other in struggles, in campaigns, through the trade unions, through community organising, etc. And we can learn a lot from each other. I mean, and that a good example is from this afternoon in itself. So I really look forward actually to meeting a lot of you if I haven't met you before, and to seeing those of you who I've met before. Yeah, so I urge you to attend the conference. And Roger, have you got any dates for us for Sunday meetings, or will they be following?
Yes, well, I'd just like, before I answer that, I'd just like to say that to echo, if you like, what you just said, Corel. You know, this is a 2-day meeting. It costs £100, all expenses included, you know, accommodation, and food, and of course, above all, the company of comrades from around the world. So I really think, I do hope that comrades will give serious consideration. We want to have a really lively and engaging debate with comrades, and to get to know comrades better, and to kind of fuse better into a team. I think we have very good relations, even though we have sometimes sharp differences. As we'll see also in the conference, but it will be comradely debate, and we will all learn and benefit from that. Now, so please, comrades, do give consideration once again, not only to coming yourselves, but to urging comrades in your area and your countries to take advantage of this opportunity. As for WIN meetings, well, we're having a break. First of all, we need time to prepare politically for the conference. Secondly, I'm speaking for myself, and I'm sure for everybody else, we're just exhausted. We've just been constant activity, both in relation to WIN and in relation to our work in the labour movement in our own countries. I would like to report, by the way, that in the last few days, we had a very, very successful launch of the campaign that WIN has initiated in Britain for a mass workers' party. We had 117 people attended for the first meeting, just an inaugural meeting, and it was only planned and advertised in the week or two beforehand. And I think the mood of the meeting and everything showed. I think we really we've got to put our ideas on the map as far as the British labour movement is concerned. I would have liked to talk a bit more about that, but then maybe at the conference we'll be able to talk about that more. So we are having a break. The next time that we meet will be the 9th and 10th of September at the youth hostel for the conference, and we'll be starting once again with a series of weekly meetings from the following Sunday, which would be 17th of September. So thanks, comrades, and I hope to see you all in person and to shake your hands physically at the meeting. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you, Roger. That's beautiful, beautiful way to end the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for you attending and for your contributions this afternoon. Thank you. I'm going to close the meeting now.